So I am Martin Clarke. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer of Mark to Market. And I'm really excited that I've got a pointy laser thing. I'm going to start with a bit of a prologue. And what I want to do is just give you a sense of where our business comes from, why we're similar to other startups in the building, and it'll become clear why I want to do that first of all. So, as with many successful startups, hopefully, it started with a cup of coffee. A nice cup of coffee at Cantini's in George Street because Doug, who was my future co-founder-to-be, he came from, I guess, investment management, so he frequents George Street. So I was quite happy. We were introduced by a good friend of mine, Bertie, who worked in co-working. Doug had a problem. Bertie thought, do you know what? I've got just the guy who can help you. He introduced me to Doug. And then later on, we brought Bertie back into the fold. A very kind of common thing that I think happens in startups around here. It's just connections. And after speaking with Doug, I really am a big believer in understanding market risk. So I think of myself as I guess, a product-focused CTO. I naturally went and decided to build a business model canvas of what I thought we were building. I'm sure people are familiar with this before. If you're not, Alex Osweiler is brilliant. It's really good stuff. Of course, it was all wrong. All wrong. We then had our first sort of prototypes. Yeah, this is all wrong as well. Crowd deals. We don't do crowd deals anymore. None of that's right. But as we started to talk to more customers, we understood a lot better what their challenges were, what their needs and wants were. And these are notes and notes and notes, loads of notes, which I protect the innocent, recordings of people that we've spoken to try and understand what the market wanted. So it was better. And then that means we get better mock-ups. We start to have silly bits of culture floating in. When Bertie got glasses, we're hoping that one's true. Then we get some more high fidelity mock-ups. So this is just stuff that's done in Vision. Again, I think this is very typical for startups in general. We just keep on progressing from MVP to MVP, increasing the fidelity, all better, to then get into a product that our customers really love. Sort of. We'll come back to what's different. So I think that's a very typical startup story. And if you spoke to a few founders in here, I'm sure at least one would have something very similar to say that's like this. But I think when you're thinking about a startup that, I'm going to coin the phrase data startup, maybe not coining it, maybe borrowing it from somebody else. There are differences, and I want to talk about what those differences are, because I think that's what's important. We have this common understanding, common set of tools that we know about that work for most startups, and then there are differences, subtle differences, I would argue, for a data startup. And what are they? Well, I'm going to coin them as my rules of thumb. First rule. Not quite right. Data is absolutely everything. And what I mean by this is that for a business like ours, data is absolutely core to the value proposition that we're presenting to our customers. It's absolutely core to the technology choices we make. It's absolutely core to the channels, to the market, and it's absolutely core to the product. It is core to everything that we do, and it influences every technique under the book, under the sun. It influences everything. I'm sure we know data is everything. So product. Now, people who know me really well know that I really like Des Traynor. Des Traynor is one of the co-founders of Intercom, and I first got exposed to this idea, I think 2012. And Des's argument, and if you've not ever seen him talk, go on YouTube, go and find it, because he'll teach you more about product than anybody I think could in 15 minutes. Des's argument was, well, look, you've got to think about the world as kind of two axes. You've got none of the people, some of the people, all of the people, none of the time, some of the time, all the time. It's very easy. Build this, don't build that. Now, you've got to think about your data, okay? When it comes to thinking about data, it's we need this data, not that data. We've got to get data that's useful to people. So it infects everything. We talk about data being everything to our business. It infects every single decision. When we're thinking about data, it's got to be data that's useful to all of our customers all of the time. It impacts how we think about market. And what I mean by that is that for many data companies, not all of us are blessed with the advantages that Simon has. You're going to start here with no data. And then in some period of time, you're maybe going to get all the data. I don't necessarily think that's really true, that you're going to have all the data. But you're going to have some data. And I think it's important when you're thinking about the data you do have that you consider the product lifecycle. And what I mean here is that, this again, it's classic diagram that I've badly drawn. We have innovators and early adopters. We have to think about the data that those customers need. It's not about, the early majority or the late majority. It's, our early customers. It's the data that's useful to them. And you have to align whatever you're doing with data with, where you are in the product lifecycle. And for us, we're like over here, maybe here. We're early. So we need to focus on what those customers need, not what these guys want. And I think, it's important to recognize as well that with the innovators, when you evaluate who your customers are, and if you're able to say, okay, I think this guy's an innovator, or I think this company, they're in the early adopters, they'll accept data that's not 100% accurate. If it makes a difference to their business, if they get the value proposition that you're coming along with, then yeah, it'll work. So I think that is the part of how it fits in the market. In terms of channels, we think of our customer base in terms of the size of the business and the sophistication of the business. So, as a financial data firm, we're very much thinking about small businesses and where their sophistication is emerging. And we're thinking about small businesses where they are already, we would say, sophisticated clients. That they have a slightly different offering than the other people. So in emerging sophistication, there's like a training element. We are effectively giving them data and giving them a product that's letting them sell a service that they couldn't sell before. So we're leveling up their game. With a sophisticated customer who is still small, it's still very much the same offering. So for these guys, it's both SaaS, and then for our large sophisticated, it's really about them just wanting the raw data. And we don't really care, well, we don't care just now about large clients who we would say are emerging in terms of their sophistication, the way that they advise their clients. This is where I realized that when I've skirted through right at the beginning of the talk, I kind of failed to set the scene that we are a financial data firm, that we're primarily helping advisory services to advise their clients about the valuations of private companies. So it's typically accountancies or corporate finance firms or investment banks that we're talking to that are in our customer base, and we're helping them solve problems for private company valuation primarily. So this works for many. The SaaS offering, that's fine. It works for many people. But some people, they just want your raw data. They just want access to bucket. They want a feed. They just want to consume it, and that's fine. And I think you need to bear that kind of in mind in terms of what is a channel that you're going to, what channels are you going to use to get to your customers. The final way that I think data impacts your business, why is data everything, is around your technology choices. Now, I'm going to simplify this a lot, but essentially, from our perspective, we think about CRUD, so create, read, update, delete. So a lot of applications we would say are CRUD applications, and there are well understood architectures out there that deal with problems that are like that. Doesn't work for us. From our perspective, what we're doing is we've got raw data capture, we've got enrichments, which I think Simon touched upon earlier, that gives us more valuable data. And then what we find is that our clients want to integrate that with their data. So we've got to merge it together. We've got to be able to edit it. And then we've got APIs and feeds going on. The thing is regular kind of CRUD architectures are not really going to work here. But you're really lucky. You're in Edinburgh. There are lots of people that kind of understand this. We were lucky that we had somebody who helped us at the beginning with this, and he learned a lot from the guys at Skyscanner. There are lots of people, I think, who understand this type of problem. So, yeah, go Edinburgh. The last thing I'd like to talk about is, what I'd say are the kind of productivity traits or the product traits that data products tend to have. And what we think about here is really about what gives enduring value. So one trait that we see often is that there are proprietary data feeds. So data exhaust firms are very good at this. I think they're very valuable in the way that that data just can't really be replicated in other means. You have physical barriers. So footfall 1, 2, 3, although they're not called that anymore, they actually measure physically people going into shopping centres and understanding what the footfall is. We have firms like PCA Predict and Zephyr Health, which are either enriching or aggregating data. And then we've got, I think, data firms which are very much focused on the integrity of data. There's a nice little anecdote here, which is about Google Maps and Apple Maps. Now, I happen to know someone who's really senior at Google, and he worked on the Google Map team, and they had this little problem, which was that they kept on finding that the Sydney Opera House would always come up in the middle of Sydney Harbour, which wasn't right. So when Apple Maps launched, they were delighted, having solved the problem themselves, seeing that the Apple Map guys had the exact same issue. They didn't know where the Sydney Opera House was. They thought it was in the middle of the ocean, which isn't very helpful. And I guess the point there is even something like geo and something like, well, where's the Sydney Opera House, you'd think is a solved problem. It's not really. There's a lot of expertise that needs to be built up by both these organizations to understand where it is. And I would argue that there are many data sets like that. Anyway, to sort of sum up, if there's one thing I'd like to remember, data is everything. It affects your product, affects your market, affects your channels, and it affects your technology choices. Thanks for listening.